So in today's post, I would like to talk to you about my research on borders and bordering practices in the Western Balkans, and this research and my upcoming book called Border Policing and Security Technologies that is going to be published by Routledge in 2019 aim to shed, however partial, light on mobility and migration regimes in this under-researched part of Europe. But the book was really underpinned, and I suppose my whole experience as border researcher is underpinned by personal experience of borders and migration, and many of us, myself included, experience changes in border regimes following the demise of the states to which we were citizens of, and I still remember that feeling of an utter despair when I found myself for the first time at the border crossings in Visegrad that divided Serbia and Republic of Srpska or Bosnia and Herzegovina after disintegration of the socialist Yugoslavia. And the river Drina that I used to cross with my parents many, many times before on our way to the Adriatic coast to have a wonderful holiday there was simply not a river anymore. It was now a border that parted people, families, friends, co-workers that speak the same language, have the same customs, and so on. So bridges all of a sudden, that were supposed to hinge people, connect people, were now obstacles that were increasingly difficult to cross. And more than 5,000 kilometres of new borders that popped up in the region after the breakup of Yugoslavia, if you like, converted and enabled the symbolic demise of my homeland into a very painful and palpable reality. And the second story that sort of I wanted to talk to you about a bit today that sort of really shows the complexity of the issues of borders in the Western Balkans happened 20 years after this one in September of 2013, and I flew from Vienna to Budapest, and at the airport a flight attendant announced that the passport control is going to be at tarmac and not inside the airport building. So this was particularly peculiar because the whole trip was within the Schengen area. So I asked the flight attendant to explain, and sort of she couldn't quite get there. And at that point I spotted a group of Roma people at the back of the plane, and the flight attendant then kind of looked at me and said, "Don't worry about it, this passport control is not for you, put your passport back to your bag." And at the tarmac, the police car came in, whisked them, and put them in a car and whisked them out of sight with the flashing lights on. And I was, when I was leaving the airport building, I saw them being escorted out, and I kept wondering for many, many days and months after this what happened to these people. So these stories capture just some of the complexities pertinent to borders and bordering practices in the Western Balkans that I tried to decipher in this book. And I think within the very rich historical context of the Balkan Wars and displacement, I did sort to map the borders and changes in bordering practices in this region and really highlight the impact of such processes on non-citizens, so people who are in three main groups of people, I suppose, in my research I focused on. And one group are the people who are transiting through the region and looking to apply for asylum or get access to the labour markets in the West, people from the Western Balkans looking for asylum and access to labour markets in the West, and the women border crossers. So this research really captured the times of the new migratory pressures generated by conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq and elsewhere, and maps the process of the temporary collapse of the border regime, but also the process of rebordering that was particularly prominent in the countries of origin and transit for border crossers. And in the book I outline and analyse the reconstruction of the migration machine in the region prior, during and after the crisis, the so-called migrant crisis. So I map the spread out, the proliferation, the location and performance of borders and bordering practices in the region, and that is at the very core, I suppose, of this volume. And I argue in the book that there is a very peculiar process happening at the same time with all these processes, and that's the process of the transformation of the bad boys of the Western Balkans to the new wardens and custodians of the EU border regime. So the region's role in reconciling a free flow of capital, money, goods and services, while at the same time ensuring that mobility is properly governed, I suppose, is the key thing that I focus and explore in the border policing and security technologies. And I examine a mapped range of technology human interventions that aim to identify, immobilize, and govern border crossers. But I also focus on how technology can help and enable mobility and create social change. So I hope that this project actually and the book generates further research that will further investigate mobility and migration in this region that has for far too long has been mostly uncharted, but whose importance in mobility management is unlikely to diminish in the near future.